Basil of Baker Street by Eve Titus. Chapter 7. We Travel in Disguise. Outside, the fog was as thick as pea soup, and we could barely see in front of our faces. Icy, slippery streets forced us to walk at a snail's pace. "We'll never make the train at this rate," said I. Basil pointed to a black, handsome cab standing in front of a house. "Perhaps we can shorten our journey. Let us wait and see." We leaned against the iron railing, huddled together. The cold seemed to creep into our very bones. Presently, a gentleman emerged. We heard him tell the cabby to drive to Euston Station.
"Luck is with us,"
whispered my companion as we climbed up on the rear of the cab.
"This will mean the saving of much valuable time."
The horse clopped along. It was all we could do to hang on, for we were jounced and jolted about. Euston Station was crowded with hurrying humans, whose feet we took care to avoid. Our small size served us well. Not a soul noticed us as we made our way to the platform and slipped into an empty first-class compartment. The whistle blew, and the train started, picking up speed until it fairly flew through the countryside. Warm and snug in a corner of our compartment, we were glad of the chance to rest. Basil stretched out his long legs and pulled his cap over his eyes, as was his habit when thinking deeply. My own thoughts were far from happy. Every click of the wheels, speeding over the shining rails, brought us closer to the unknown perils that lay ahead. Basil was sure he would solve this case before the 48 hours were up. His failures had been few, but what if this proved to be one of them? He seemed to have read my mind, for he said, "'Pon my word, Dawson, you look as though the world were coming to an end. Surely you do not doubt that I shall solve this mystery? Never fear, I shall. Meanwhile, I'll teach you some sailors' lingo I picked up during my waterfront jaunts, for we must not betray our true identities to the Terrible Three, or anyone else in Mousecliff." The phrases he taught me were fairly simple, and I practiced sailor talk for the rest of the trip. At Workington, we found that the fog had lifted. A yellow moon cast an eerie glow over Basil's face as he studied his pocket compass to determine our direction. Our path lay along a narrow road that mounted a steep cliff. The ocean roared angrily far below. The road descended into a valley, then continued through some thick woods. Occasionally we heard an owl hooting. I quaked in my boots, having no wish to end my days as a juicy morsel for one of our age-old enemies. Fortunately, we met none of them face to face. Dawn was breaking when at last we reached the Grey Mouse Inn. A night clerk dozed in an easy chair. I nudged him gently. Yawning, he went behind the desk and pushed the desk book towards us. Basil signed first, chuckling as he did so. When my turn came, I saw that he had registered as Captain Baker of Blackpool. Not to be outdone, I signed myself Mr. Street of Southampton. Our room was large and airy. The sun was rising to signal the start of a new day, but every bone in my body cried out for a rest. I lowered the blinds. "Captain Baker, your investigations must wait. We didn't sleep a wink last night. About Mr. Street, I am fully awake, and plan to nose about down in the lobby. The town gossips might have some interesting information. May I expect the pleasure of my first mate's company? Oh, you may not, I replied drowsily. Fully clothed, I flung my tired body across one of the beds. My eyelids grew heavy, and I drifted into a deep, dreamless sleep. Chapter 8. Basil makes some deductions. Arise, my slumbering sea mouse. The hour is noon. I stirred and stretched lazily. Bright sunlight shone full in my eyes. Basil stood at my bedside, looking highly pleased with himself. I had quite a chat with the innkeeper, and I'm in possession of some helpful facts. Would you care to hear about it? By all means, said I, propping myself up against my pillow. At first, the innkeeper told me very little. Since he is a stay-at-home type who has probably never been out of Mousecliff, I deduced that he must depend upon the exploits of others for excitement. I won his goodwill with my imaginary adventures as captain of the stout ship Pied Piper. It would have warmed your heart to listen, for my first mate, Mr. Street, was always the hero. Indeed. When we fought unfriendly natives in the South Sea Isle, your bravery, Mr. Street, saved the day. And in New York City, you rescued me from a tribe of wild bandits at the risk of your life. Hear, hear, I cried, trying not to smile. In return for these tall tales, the innkeeper chatted about many Mousecliff inhabitants. At last he got around to carpenters. He rubbed his paws together in satisfaction. Our messenger's name is Harry Hawkins. He is well liked and known as a fine carpenter. However, jobs have been scarce this past year. At times his wife and their 8 young ones almost starved. Then Hawkins' luck changed. He was hired to do some cabinet work on the yacht Victoria, anchored here in the harbour, at a high rate of pay. Basil smiled so broadly that I sat up in bed and said, If you will pardon my mentioning the unmentionable, you look as smug as the cat that swallowed the canary. Can it be that the yacht has not one owner, but 3? Excellent! You are really learning to deduce, Dawson. No one knows them as the Terrible 3, of course, but I hear they are nasty characters, disliked for their overbearing ways. I swung my feet to the floor. This is all very interesting, Basil, but I happen to be hungry. Good! We lunch at the Flying Squirrel down at the docks. The Terrible 3 eat there quite often, and I'd like a look at the scoundrels. Afterwards we shall pay a few calls. We freshened up a bit, and Basil applied touches of grease paint where needed. Then we sauntered out into the sunshine. It was a crisp midwinter day. The sky was a beautiful blue, and Mousecliff-on-Sea was a pretty town. Our city-bred noses sniffed at the salty sea air and found it much to our liking. Since there were many sailors about, we attracted no attention. At the Flying Squirrel we ordered cheese and chips. Just as our food arrived, we noticed 3 mice standing in the doorway. I must say that I shouldn't have enjoyed encountering any of them alone in a dark alley. They were more like apes than like mice. With their hulking shoulders and long, loose-hanging arms, They swaggered in, sneering at everyone they passed. Basil, without seeming to do so, sharply scrutinized their faces. One of them purposely pushed against our table. The plates almost slid off, and he laughed out loud. Angry, I rose to my feet, but Basil whispered,
"This is not the time,"
and I sat down meekly. The terrible three were 2 tables away. Snatches of their talk came to our ears. One of them said, "Let's eat here tonight. The food's a sight better than the slop we get aboard the yacht. The quicker we get hold of another ship's cook, the better it'll be for our insides." He called over to Basil. "Captain, do you know of a good ship's cook? We'll be willing to pay well." Basil shook his head. "Sorry, mate, our own cook aboard the Pied Piper is none too good. I'm in the same fix you are." We paid our bill and left. Rambling through the town, he said,
"I recognise them. Each is an expert in his own field of crime, and has been behind bars. Now that I know where they will be early this evening, I have decided upon my course of action. They will find that they are not the only ones who can mastermind a plot."
He halted in front of a grocer's shop. The sign above read, "Sam Stilton, Proprietor."
"Next we pay a call here. These places are usually gold mines of information, although I rather fancy I'll have to do a lot of listening before I find out what I wish to know. Pray do not be surprised if I sound like a gossip myself. It's give and take, you know."
He held the door open with a flourish and bowed low. "You first, my dear, first, mate." I bowed in return and entered the grocer's shop. Thank you for listening to Grandad Ork. You can hear more stories by going to the Grandad Ork channel, and if you want to hear stories read back to back, then have a look in the playlists. If you subscribe to the channel, then you'll know when a new one is ready. The books are available in most high street stores, libraries, and there are links to some online sellers in the description below if you don't have a copy. So, until next time, bye for now.